More of nothing? Artyom, the only thing I can hear is that Geiger counter ticking. Yes, and there's also those damn things. Calling all the time.
The Metro series of video games is a relatively new one, but on the last generation of consoles gained a dedicated fanbase for its retelling of Dmitry Glukhovsky's novels. 1.5 years ago, developer 4A Games treated us to a reveal trailer that seemed to suggest a more open world to explore, as well as an adventure outside of the claustrophobic tunnels we're so used to. And at last year's E3 showed us just how ambitious they were being. Does this game, much like our protagonist, move on from its cult underground status and breathe the fresh air of the mainstream? Starting off after Last Light, Artyom is looking for signs of life outside of the Moscow metro when a train shows him and the rest of the Spartans that 20 or so years in hell may have been a lie. The crew travel out on their new mode of transport named the Aurora in search of life and a government that hasn't been heard from since the war. The game has a few twists and turns, but nothing you can't see coming a mile off, and about halfway through becomes a much more personal journey for Artyom and the crew. There are also decisions you will have to make that you may not feel will have too much of an impact, but can change the outcomes for certain characters hugely. While this level of consequence is always appreciated, you'll feel they could have done more with it, as the outcomes generally affect other characters rather than yourself. You may not even realise why or how a certain thing happened, or if there was even an alternative to begin with.
Listen up, everyone! The Baron is about to speak! Listen up, everyone! The Baron is speaking! Now, what is going on with the airfield? The boys are saying it's crawling with freaks.
If there's one thing you can say about Metro Exodus, it's that it's absolutely stunning to look at. Even with the amount of high fidelity big budget releases in the last few years, Exodus is, environmentally at least, one of the best. Coming above ground allows for sweeping landscapes that regularly take your breath away, and makes the tension Metro is known for even more palpable. As if to highlight this, the devs have clearly gone to great length to try and make this wasteland a living, breathing world, with some of the best weather effects and animations you can witness in any video game. Flags flutter in the wind, rocks fall away from your feet on cliff edges, and non-lethal mutations hover above your head and scurry around your feet. You may regularly find yourself taking a smoke break on the Aurora just to take in the view. However, the game can ruin this with several technical issues that take you completely out of it. On a PS4 Pro, textures pop in and out particularly at distance, enemy bodies can flop and continue moving even after death, and frame rates drop considerably during intense firefights. On top of this, load times to get into the worlds can top regularly more than 4 minutes, which completely ruins the atmosphere. This takes a bit of the shine off what has clearly been made to be a polished game.
I was 5 back then and didn't really get much. But I could imagine that village and the ocean so vividly, because I believed her.
The gameplay is strong. Artyom can now use some of the most interesting weapons he's ever used before. A crossbow that can fire explosive bolts is a real highlight. There's also a pretty basic crafting system that can be done on the fly through Artyom's backpack that doesn't feel tacked on or too much of a burden. This means you can add upgrades to your weapons when and where you find them and craft ammo when you need it. Crafting materials in the game are also rare enough to give you motivation to explore the world and think twice about using that medkit, but abundant enough not to turn it into a real grindfest. The gunplay still has that Metro signature jankiness that will make you wonder if it was implemented that way or just badly designed. Returning fans will no doubt love this, but newcomers might struggle to get into it. The open worlds themselves aren't quite giant playgrounds as opposed to sideshows to the story. While there are plenty of places to explore and find using your binoculars, these amount to little more than circles on a map, and in most areas are usually just standard bases for bandits or nests for mutants. A lot of the time you'll go there, find a few enemies, kill them, get a bit of scrap, and that's that. Occasionally, however, there are some very interesting areas that tie in well with the story. This can be frustrating because if you want to pick up the diamonds hidden away, you have to generally go through quite a bit of rough. A frozen Volga river, a desert Mad Max style Caspian coast, and a lush forest on the Tiger. These all make use of the waterways they live, making for some interesting geography which lends itself very well to the fantastic scenery mentioned before. It also means story missions are particularly good, making use of great set pieces. But it's exactly these missions and set pieces that make the rest of the world you can explore a little flat. Unless you're a hardened completionist, you'll probably find yourself skipping a lot of the map markers before the end.
Train! The fucking train has arrived! Do you fucking copy?
Metro Exodus is the best entry in the Metro series, and 4A Games have clearly pushed themselves to the very limit to bring a game that competes heavily with big single-player releases. The environments are stunning, and the game played out in them is tense and nerve-wracking. However, there isn't much that will make you want to come back a second time, and the open world feels more like tacked-on areas that complement the main quest if nothing else. Technical issues can also spoil the view, and 4A will have to push a little harder with some post-launch patches to really make this a top-tier title.